Last week at UFC Vegas 23, Vegas went 11-2. Back-to-back chalky weeks, folks. But hey, they went 11-2, and that means that there was two opportunities to get a victory against Vegas or against the odds makers, which is what the sole intended purpose of this show is, right? It's to exploit the value to be had on all of the UFC betting dockets. So what's going on, folks? My name is Derick G. I am your host. Thanks for tuning in, as always, on this afternoon here. Another good one from allfactorsconsidered.com. Man. So keep it locked, stay tuned, all that good stuff, man. But today we're here to talk about UFC Vegas 24, man. Whitaker versus Gastelum. We got the Reaper, we got Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whitaker versus Kelvin Gastelum, aka Nasrat Hakparas. Yeah, it's a little inside joke, man. Dudes look like twins and whatnot. But nonetheless, man, this could be a UFC a pay-per-view, really. This could be a UFC 261, 262, but instead they gave it to us for free on ESPN Plus. So if you got that, you're going to be able to check into this one, man. And let's just get straight to it, man. So like I said, Vegas went 11-2. Notable underdog wins. We got Man Mountain, Dan Ho. He got the win over Yorgan De Castro, which was a nasty knockout. Round one, man. It was ugly, but it was beautiful at the same time because that's what the sport is, right? The next one was John McDessie, man. He had a fight of the night contender with Bahamondes, man. But Bahamondes missed weight, and I'm guessing that's part of the reason why the fight of the night was given to Julian Marquez and Sam Alvey as opposed to McDessie, who should have got $100K to himself since Bahamondes, was ineligible because he missed weight, right? But listen, man, that's some of that last week stuff, man. I do just want to give you a quick reminder before we straight jump into things, man. Go check us out, www.allfactorsconsidered.com. That is the hub, that is the home for everything AFC related, man. All of that fight talk, all of the good stuff is all there. But if you don't want to go to the website, right, then you go over to our YouTube. You hit us up on Instagram at All Factors Considered. And YouTube, like I said, just type us in Free Thinkers Club or All Factors Considered. Drop a like, subscribe, and hit the little notification bell because by doing that, by subscribing, you will get access to all three of our MMA shows every single week. This one, All Bets Aren't Created Equal, and then our preview and our post show over there at just All Factors Considered Normal, man. But let's do what we do best here. We're going to start the clock, and let's get into it, folks. So before we start, you can see I got this little, if you're watching, you can see that I got this little note in the corner. It's a tweet by John Morgan of MMA Junkie, and the tweet goes as such. He says, due to COVID protocols, Ricardo Ramos, he's not participating in today's media day per UFC officials. We do not have any further information at this time as to whether or not that will impact his scheduled fight at UFC Vegas 24. So what this is telling me is that because Ramos isn't being allowed to participate in the media day, there's a high likelihood that he will not be allowed to weigh in just a couple of days if he's still got the COVID stuff going on. And with that being said, this bout, most likely will be moved to another date. And if it's not, then, I mean, hey, man, I'm super glad, and I'm glad we got to keep it. But we're not going to cover it because I don't want to cover something that isn't going to happen and gives me less time to talk about the other stuff that is going to happen. So let me drop that one down, man. And like I said, we got the clock going. So let's start off at the top. Let's start off with Bobby Knuckles, man. Whitaker versus Gastelum. Now, Whitaker coming in, he's 13-3 in the UFC. He's coming off a huge win against Jared Cannonier, a fight that I picked against him. I thought Cannonier was going to get that one done. And he's facing off against Kelvin Gastelum, who is 11-6 with one no contest in the UFC, coming off a huge must-win back against the wall, fighting for his job type victory against Ian Heinisch, man. And it showed off the wrestling. It goes to show that Kelvin Gastelum is not a one-sided fighter. You know what I mean? He's balanced. He can do multiple things, and that's the beauty of him. He's very underrated. And that's the theme for this matchup and what I want to talk about in terms of the betting line. Now, we see it. Minus 290 for Bobby Knuckles, right? Plus 210 for Kelvin Gastelum. The odds makers are really not giving Gastelum a chance here. But I think that, once again, I say it often, this should be closer to a pick'em fight than this is just a landslide for Robert Whitaker. And the reason why I say that is because Kelvin Gastelum, if you look at his last three losses against the Joker, Jack Hermanson, he got heel hooked really quickly. Everyone even watching that said those are just odd performance from Gastelum. Normally, he's really hard to take down. He didn't really get like crazy taken down in that fight. It was more of like a sprawl into a heel hook, and Gastelum just tapped and said, early night at the office, man, this one sucked, but we'll get back to the drawing board, right? You look at the one before that, a very close split decision loss against Darren Till that could have gone either way. And then before that, he loses to the champ, Israel Adesanya, in a unanimous decision loss, but that was a fight to the death. That was the famous Israel Adesanya, like, you got to kill me if you want to win in this bout, right? So with the peripherals there, this has the makings to be just a straight up kickboxing match, man. The one thing that is going to be a game changer for these two, who were originally supposed to fight back in 2019, actually. It's February 9th of 2019, but Robert Whittaker, he had to pull out because of a hernia. So this fight's been long due, right? But one of the things that could really make this interesting is the takedowns, right? Because we're talking about stand-up. Robert Whittaker, he's at 4.5 significant strikes landed per minute at about 40% clip, right? 40% accuracy, which is really good, man. We know Bobby Knuckles is good with the hands, good with the calf kicks, all the good stuff. Now, Kelvin Gastelum is, he lands 3.6 significant strikes landed per minute, and he's at about a 43% clip. So they're more or less on par in terms of paper, but I don't want to necessarily go off paper because we have to go off a feel on this one. And what I will note about these two is I think that it's fair to say that Robert Whittaker will have a speed advantage in this one. I think he landed a little crisper blows. I think the calf kick is going to be very important in this matchup. And the thing about Kelvin Gastelum that's always worked out, that's why I've always been such a big fan of him, is because it's not about speed or power with him. It's about timing, right? It's about setting up your shots. And that's Kelvin Gastelum is a master of setting things up on the feet. So what that means is he's going to put himself in a position to feint a shot, to draw out your counter, and then counter your counter on top of that, and just play, 4D chess. There's levels to this. So that's why he's been able to have the prolonged success that he's had in these bouts. But the question is going to come down for this main matchup, right? This big one. Who is going to be fresher in the later rounds? Now, off the bat, I want to say Robert Whittaker. And the reason why I say that is because he's just been in there more. You know what I mean? So he's 22-5. Kelvin Gastelum is 17-6. So Robert Whittaker, he's got a couple more fights, right? Nothing too crazy. But the big differential here is that in 5-round fights, Robert Whittaker is 3-0 in his career. He's at 2 in the UFC and 1 outside of the UFC. Now, Kelvin Gastelum, both of his 5-round fights in the UFC, he has lost. He's 0-2 in those 5-round fights. So this is going to be like a gut check situation, right? People might be bringing this up, and Kelvin Gastelum might have to say, like, man, I need to really make sure my cardio is right. I need to be able to last into those late rounds, because one thing we know about both of these individuals is that they're really, really hard to get out of there, right? Kelvin Gastelum has never been knocked out in his career, 12 knockout wins himself, but he's never been knocked out. And Robert Whittaker, 9 knockout wins on his side, but he has been finished twice via a KO/a TKO, and the only one in his last 5 was against Israel Adesanya, and we saw that was just, poetry in motion right there, right? So let's really talk about it, man. What is going to be the key difference here? Because I'm leaning Robert Whittaker on this one. I think money line in and of itself is, it's not great value, because I do think this is going to be a pick'em, but I don't really. There's something that's not letting me gravitate towards Kelvin Gastelum the way that maybe some others would, just simply because I felt like Robert Whittaker was kind of ready and past this chapter, and he's ready to get right back to be the title. He's kind of like the people's champ. If Israel Adesanya were to have won the light heavyweight championship and then he were to just focus on that, I think it would have been fair to say Robert Whittaker is the real champ of the middleweight division. But with Izzy there, we clearly know who's on top of the throne, right? Now, Kelvin Gastelum, just one fight ago, like I said earlier, he was on the precipice of losing his job. He was literally on the chopping block. So I think there's going to be a lot of urgency in Gastelum, and I think that's going to be the problem. Because Whittaker right now, while people are saying, he's throwing away his title opportunities away and all that good stuff, I just think the pressure is on Gastelum more than it's on Whittaker. I think Whittaker is just game. He's ready to go out there and make a statement, but the odds makers are the ones putting pressure on Whittaker, because minus 290 is pretty heavy. Now, if we're not super interested in purely a betting perspective, a money line perspective, right? We want to take a look at the props. Well, I took a look at the props, and the only one that really stood out to me, because I do think there's a possibility of this, is this fight going under 4.5 rounds. That's at plus 111 right now, and I think that's not a bad bet. And the reason why I say that is because, like I said, in the last 5 fights, only 2 finishes between both of these fighters. And what I mean in terms of a loss, right? So Israel Adesanya knocked out Robert Whittaker in round 2 in their championship fight. All right, cool. Kelvin Gastelum got finished submission round 1 against Jack Hermanson. You look at everything else, it's unanimous decision, split decision. These dudes are going the distance time and time again, right? Now, Kelvin Gastelum, he has the opportunity to put you out with that one shot. You know what I mean? I think he truly does have that power. He's a southpaw. That body kick is going to be wide open for Whittaker all day. or for Kelvin Gastelum on Whitaker all day, but that goes to show that Whitaker, he just has a way to use all of his extremities, man. He used the calf kick very well. He drop up that head kick. It's very snapping. His shots are very snapping. Kelvin Gastelum is more looping. He's a little more, kind of hold it out there a little bit. And I think Whitaker is just going to get there a little bit quicker. So my money here, and in terms of like what I'm supporting here, is minus 290 for Robert Whitaker. I think it's fair. I wouldn't suggest that people go out there and just drop a boatload of money on Whitaker because there's more value to be found on other aspects of this card. But nonetheless, plus 210, it's just, I don't think it's worth it, to pick Kelvin Gastelum in this situation unless he could really utilize the wrestling and somehow keep Robert Whitaker on the ground. But like I said, it's 5 rounds, and every single round starts up on the feet, and I think Whitaker just has the advantage there. It's going to be a very close striking contest, and this could, has all the makings to shape up to be a straight-up beautiful kickboxing match. So I think this is going to be fireworks nonetheless, but my 2 proposals here that I'm heavy on, right, is minus 290 Robert Whitaker. I think that's easy if you just want to throw a little bit of money on that, or under 4.5 rounds plus 111 for a stoppage, man, because I think this one has the makings of that kickboxing match, and if it does, I think someone is going to sleep here. I think finally these two have matched up perfectly, and listen, man, a head kick here, a big left cross there, you never know, someone may be going to sleep. It would be too easy to just say, oh, this is going to be a war and neither one of them is going to drop. It'd be too easy to say that. I think that'd be too easy in what we would predict. But oftentimes when we're talking about odds, wagering and betting and whatnot, it doesn't exactly go that way, right? There's a lot of ways this could play out. So that's what I got for the main event for UFC Vegas 24. Robert Whitaker for versus Kelvin Gastelum. At the end of the day, Gastelum, I think he still really needs these wins. I think if he goes right back to another loss off of this one, he's going to be back against the wall again in his next fight. And as for Robert Whitaker, he wants to, keep stringing these dubs together so he can get closer to that rematch with Israel Adesanya, or maybe even Paulo Costa next, depending on how this fight gets finished. But nonetheless, man, I think the pressure probably is on Gastelum, even though overtly in terms of like the public perception, it may be on Whitaker, but I think the internal pressure is probably a little higher on Gastelum. So I'm expecting Whitaker to come out calm and composed and patient, and Gastelum maybe trying to press it and force the action a little bit, which is why I have to lean Robert Whitaker. So let's move on to the next one, which is this is going to be a really interesting one. Our co-main event is Jeremy Stephens, a little heathen, right, facing off against Jakar Close. And listen, folks, this is a really great matchup, right? And I think a lot of people are going to look at Jeremy Stephens and they're going to look at his last 5 and say, I don't even know why this matchup is taking place right now. You know what I mean? I think Jakar Close is a young prospect. He's probably going to come in. I don't even know why he's an underdog. Not really, minus 105 to minus 120, minus 120 for Jeremy Stephens, minus 105 for Close, right? You would say that's more or less in that pick'em territory, but Jeremy Stephens, you want to talk about experience, man. MMA 28-18, 15-17 with 1 no contest in the UFC versus Jakar Close, who was only 5-2 in the UFC. He has a lot less experience, but it's just difficult, man. And it's an old proverb you're going to hear in terms of people who do odds, wagering and whatnot. And they're going to say it's tough betting against experience. And I'm sorry, even though Jeremy Stephens is 34 years old and he is 0-4 with 1 no contest in his last 5 fights, I think he has a very, very big chance of winning this fight. And hear me out. Now, if you look at his last fight against Calvin Keator, you can say, okay, well, he got knocked out in the second round, dude. What are you talking about? Like, he's not, the same dude that he was in his prime and when he was younger and whatnot. And while that totally may be true, you can't just look at numbers. You can't just go on ESPN, look at results and be like, oh, I know how that happened, or I know how this fight's going to play out, without actually watching it. That's why, people like us, we sit here, at allfactorsconsidered.com and we break down the film study so we can actually see the game within the game, or the real picture within that number, or within that, result. So when you look at Jeremy Stephens versus Calvin Keator, man, I think he was winning that first round. He decisively, the leg kick was firing, the hands, little loopy, little hooks, but he was still getting it down. But that leg kick is a major component of what his game is. And I think Jeremy Stephens is known as this wrestler dude. But listen, man, I mean, at this point right now, he averages 1.16 takedowns per 15 minutes at a 38% clip. Like, if he can have success on the feet, he's going to keep it there. And against a dude like Jakar Close, who is a BJJ purple belt, he's a former collegiate wrestler at North Idaho University. He's a young savage who is frankly coming off of a devastating loss to Beneil Dariush, the one infamous, scene where you see Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier and John Anik like, oh, mind blown, right? That was when Beneil Dariush knocked out Jakar Close after Jakar Close was right on the precipice of knocking out Beneil Dariush. It was crazy, but that's the name of the game, right? So we have to ask ourselves, Jeremy Stephens, he's able to lose 4 and then 1 no contest in a row and still come back and say, I'm ready to get down, I'm ready to make it happen, I'm still looking for that dub. Like, this dude has seen losses before. Like I said, that experience. Now, Jakar Close, he's young, he's 33 years old, but I'm saying he's young in terms of MMA experience as opposed to Jeremy Stephens. And we need to really see how he's going to be able to bounce back from this loss. This is the first knockout loss of his entire career. And the last loss that he has in his last 5 was against David Tamer, or he might have actually, no. That's it. So he lost to Tamer, and that was a unanimous decision loss, and that goes to be his only decision loss. So other than that, he's basically getting it done, man. I really believe in the prospect of Jakar Close. I really was excited for the bout that he was supposed to originally have against Luis Pena, the violent Bob Ross, who was actually on this card as well. We talk about him in just a couple slots. But listen, at the end of the day, let's talk about the odds, right? Because that's what we're here for. -120 for Jeremy Stephens, -105 for Jakar Close. I'm going Jeremy Stephens on this one. I think -120 is very fair. I think that these odds are going to change as the week progresses, as we get closer to Saturday night's event. And I think that the experience is going to play a big factor, but this is going to be the key takeaway for me right here. Whoever gets their calf kick going first, whoever can establish the calf kick and can really make it happen, it's going to be similar to Jimmy Rivera versus Pedro Munoz in my opinion, right? It's because whoever can establish that calf kick, even though they're both calf kickers, will probably have the edge in the fight. And then we can just go and see, all right, what about the takedowns, right? Jakar Close averages 1.5 takedowns per 15 minutes at about a 30% clip with a 68% takedown defense, while Jeremy Stephens has a 58% striking defense. That's not what I want. 65% takedown defense. So on paper, we're almost literally like parallels here, So that's why I think when you get 2 people who are high-level wrestlers, you generally see a kickboxing match. When you see 2 kickboxers who are high-level, you might see some clinch work and, trying to take one to the ground and, trying to get the edge wherever you can. And if you're Jeremy Stephens, you've seen it all. You've done it all. You've been a UFC vet since 2007. Your last one was a knockout in a second-round knockout versus Josh Emmett back in 2018, man. So it's been 3 years. You need a really, really big win. And listen, another loss for Jeremy Stephens might mean retirement, and what that tells me is that his back is against the wall, and Jakar Close is going to have to bring it, absolutely bring it. But I will say, Jeremy Stephens fighting out of Alliance MMA and Jakar Close at Fight Ready. These are 2 high-level camps. They both have fought killers in their last 5, you know what I mean? And I think that Jakar Close in a very big test and a very huge victory for him was against Yagos, right? I don't remember his first name. I think it's Christos Yagos, and that was 2 fights ago. And that was a dude who's a heavy wrestler, man. This dude gets the job done in wrestling, and Jakar Close was able to stave off some of that wrestling and ultimately, really beat him up in the 3rd round and get the unanimous decision win. Listen, man, Jeremy Stephens, he's fought Calvin Keator, Yair Rodriguez twice, Zabit Magomed Sharapov, and Jose Aldo in his last 5, while Jakar Close has fought Beneil Dariush, Christos Yagos, Bobby Green, Lando Venata, and David Tamer. Now, I don't want to put any disrespect on anybody, man, but I'm just going to say that at the end of the day, Jeremy Stephens has fought a killer's row in his last 5, and I think that Jakar Close is nowhere near the opposition that the rest of those individuals are. So at the end of the day, I think Jeremy Stephens -120, very, very fair bet. Now, I want to move on to this next one because we're starting to run out of time here, and I'm going to start breezing through a couple of these because I want to hit my best bets too. Andre Arlovski, he's making a very quick turnaround since his last fight back on February 20th against Tom Aspinall, right? Liverpool's Tom Aspinall, and he doesn't get any favors, man. You get the Vanilla Gorilla next, man. You get Chase Sherman, and we need to monitor the situation because the odds right now, Arlovski -130, +105 for Chase Sherman. This is Chase Sherman's 2nd stint in the UFC. He went, I believe, let me see here. He went 2-5 in his first stint in the UFC, which started back in 2016. Fought some killers, you know what I mean? He exited to the UFC with the loss against Augusto Sakai, a fight that was very back and forth until, it wasn't. Sakai took it over in the 3rd round, ended up getting a TKO finish, but ultimately, man, I think he's back, and he's back with a vengeance. The man is 31 years old, fighting out of Jackson Wink MMA, and listen, Andre Arlovski, no slouch, I believe that I picked for him in his last fight against Tom Aspinall because I thought that he'd be able to do what he did against Tanner Boser against Tom Aspinall. And here we are talking about him again. And I'm just going to say this, man. Wolverine, he's a beast. He's got 50 professional fights in his MMA career. He's 19-14 in the UFC with 2 no contests. And at the end of the day, this man is going to make this a kickboxing match. And the last thing you want to do against Chase Sherman is fight a kickboxing match because the man is a slickster boxer. He has mastered the art of all 8 limbs. And listen, man. What I love most about Chase Sherman, and I'll be honest, if I was a heavyweight, I would want to fight like Chase Sherman because this man, he's going to throw in big shots. You know, he's going to throw in 5-6 shots in a row. He landed a beautiful, I believe it was a 1-2. Yeah, it was a 1-2, 1, 3, you know, then an uppercut, then a calf kick. Like, he does that all at one time. And that's the beauty here is that Andre Arlovski, what I think his key is going to be is to try to throw in 1-2 shots. And Chase Sherman, instead of backing away or walking backwards with his hands up, you know, clenched up and things like that, what he does instead is he stands his ground and he looks to counter, right? So I think if Andre Arlovski is naturally a counter striker. That's what he's been throughout his entire career, and we know that, right? But if you're going to try to counter strike the dude who is more or less a counter striker, and it's a counter striker versus a counter striker, but one sits down and throws extended combinations and isn't afraid to walk into the fire, and the other one who is a little more tentative, and Andre Arlovski, who just got submitted for the second time in his entire career in his last fight, came out really aggressive. He's probably going to sit there and be tentative and be thinking a little bit more than Chase Sherman is, in my opinion. And listen, man, Chase Sherman, the other reason why you don't want to stand with him, he's got 15 wins in his MMA career. He's won by knockout in 14 of those 15 career wins. You look at his last 5. Dirty knockout against Ike Villanueva, second round knockout. And then when, you know, outside of the UFC, TKO round 1, TKO round 1, TKO round 1. And then in his last fight, and in his last fight in his first in the UFC, like I said, he got TKO round 3 to Augusto Sakai. But ultimately, he's got 6 losses. He's been knocked out in 4 of those losses, and he's lost the other 2 by decision. So generally speaking, this dude is looking to end it. He does not want to go to the distance. And Andre Arlovski's got a tough test under his belt. You know what I mean? Like I said, he averages less than a takedown per fight. He has a 57% striking defense. That's going to be important here. He's going to need to use it. He's going to need to stay away at distance and hopefully win by points. But like I said, when momentum, you know, starts going in the wrong way, it really starts to avalanche, man. You know, that snowball effect. So I'm going Chase Sherman all day long, plus 105. This is what what I like to do is I come in here and I say, all right, man, let me look at all of the, you know, odds and, you know, what stands out to me. Does this look about right, or is there anything that really blows my mind? And this one blew my mind because Chase Sherman, yeah, he's been away from the UFC for a little bit, but he's 1-0 in his second stint in the UFC, knocked out Ike Villanueva, who was a very, very hard guy to put away. And Andre Arlovski, I think he's going to get next on the hit list and unfortunately move his streak from 19-14 to 19-15 in the UFC. But one more thing that I'll save it for my best bet. So let's move on to the next one. This one, I don't have much to say because I feel bad for one of these parties involved, man. Jacob Malkoun. This dude fights out of the same camp that Robert Whittaker does over there at PMA Super Martial Arts, in Australia. He's 25 years old, 5'9", 73-inch reach. You know, this is a dude who couldn't get fights out there in Australia, so they brought him into the UFC. He wasn't a title holder in the regional scene. You know, it was just like a tough dude who couldn't get these fights booked. So they said, all right, let's see what you can do in the UFC. Probably got, you know, vouched for by Robert Whittaker, Bobby Knuckles, you know, good guy Bobby Knuckles. But he's fighting a absolute killer, and Abdul Razak Al Hassan, you know. So Al Hassan, here's the thing that we need to take into context about him, right? This dude is a killer. He's got 10 wins, 3 losses. All 10 wins have come via knockout, but he has been knocked out once in his career, and that came in his last fight, and it was nasty, man. He fought Chaos Williams. I picked for Al Hassan. I didn't know about the legend of Chaos at the time. But Chaos put him away, man, in like 30 seconds, maybe 25, something like that. It was nasty. It was the first strike to land, and unfortunately, Al Hassan, he just walked into one, and that was it. But if we look at before that, he has another loss against Munir Lazez, who was very high level, dude out of Abu Dhabi. It looked bad because he just got TKO'd bad against Warley Alves in Abu Dhabi, I believe, at Fight Island. That was tough, right? But when we look at the last 3 that Al Hassan is taking care of, man, Nico Price and then Homasi. He fought this dude Homasi twice, knocked him out in the first round twice. You know, the first one was questionable, brought him back again, knocked him out again in the first round. And like I said, being able to knock out Nico Price in the first round is pretty incredible. And on top of that, there's actually a cool stat that I have here that Al Hassan has 2 knockouts in the UFC in under 1 minute, which is incredible. You just don't starch high level. You know, this is the best people in the world right here, right? You don't starch these people like that. Those 2 individuals who were knocked out in under 1 minute in the UFC. His first one was Charles Ward, which I believe was his UFC debut. And the second one was Nico Price. And he knocked out, Nico Price. It was like 40 seconds, something like that, man. And Nico Price is tough, man. You do not get that guy out of there. He's famous for, being at the end of the fight, having like half his eye blown out and just smile and be like, yeah, let's rock, let's do it. So, listen, that's just me vouching for Al Hassan, because Jacob Malkoun, he showed absolutely nothing in his UFC debut. I'm not going to say that he's not a killer. Dude has a lot of skills. And when I watch his regional fights and, his fights outside of the UFC, like, this dude is a beast. But when he fought Phil Hawes, which was, first off, that's a killer in your UFC debut. I don't remember if that was a short notice fight or what the situation was, but he got knocked out in 18 seconds. Landed 0 strikes. I think he threw some, but yeah, landed 0 strikes, 0 takedowns, 0 everything, zeros across the board when you look at his UFC stats. And yeah, he just got starched. It was very bad. It was very, very, very bad. And I think that for that reason, that's why he's plus 235. But I think something that we need to take into account, because I feel bad for him. This is killer's row, right? This is one dog after the next. But the one saving grace that we have here is that, being that he's a BJJ purple belt, he's a former pro boxer. This dude also has some wrestling skills. Jacob Malkoun does have some wrestling skills. And if he can get this fight to the ground, then this is going to be really, really interesting, right? Because if he can get it to the ground, listen, Al Hassan, he's got a 42% takedown defense, and he comes out looking to headhunt. So if you can get him to gas out in the first round, which is what Lazzez did basically, is just weather the storm, shell up, use a little bit of head movement, slip out the way, or whatever the case may be, but let him throw too many punches in that first round and then just try to pick him apart. And Jacob Malkoun can win this fight if that's what he does. So being a plus 235 underdog, there's a lot of value there. But I'm gonna be honest with you, the thing that makes this so difficult to bet on, or even to analyze, is that how is Al Hassan gonna respond after suffering the first knockout loss of his entire career? I don't know. He's training under Saif Saud at Fortis MMA over there in Texas, and he actually started off his career, regionally in Texas, kind of like the Kevin Hollands, and we had Valerie Soto on here, and all that good stuff, right? So he started off at XKO. He, even moved over to Rox Extreme, had a couple fights in Bellator, then moved up to the UFC. Like, this dude is a little bit experienced, more experienced than Malkoun, that's for sure. But listen, I'm just going to make this one easy for everybody involved here, man. There's almost no props on this one. Odds makers want to stay away. So I'm going minus 320 Al Hassan. That's just like, it's going to be miraculous to see Malkoun pull this one off to see if he can get a dub. It's possible. Anything's possible. And all bets aren't created equal. You know what we say here, but yeah, let's go Al Hassan minus 320. That's easy. And then move on to this last one for the main card, because like I said, we're not going to talk about the Ramos versus Bill Algeo fight. And the reason for it is because, once again, I'll bring it up in case, you tuned in a little late or something like that. But John Morgan of MMA Junkie has noted that due to COVID protocols, Ricardo Ramos not participating in the media day. So there's high likelihood he's not going to be fighting, this weekend. But we'll see. Hopefully he does. But I don't want to cover something we're not, especially with only 5 minutes left. So lastly, Luis Pena versus, Alexander Munoz, man. First and foremost, Violent Bob Ross. He was supposed to fight Jakar Close, but here he is. He gets a completely different matchup. He gets an absolute wrestler, a killer in this matchup. But listen, man, Violent Bob Ross, minus 160 underdog, coming back at you. Alexander Munoz at plus 125. Here's the thing you need to know about Munoz, man. He looks a little bit different. He got pieced up real bad in his last fight against Nasrat Haqparast. It was a unanimous decision loss, where I think this dude probably shot for like 10 takedowns and got absolutely none of them. He just got pieced up instead. Every time he shot for a takedown, Nasrat was giving it to him, But I knew this dude from somewhere. And when I was doing some of my, fight research and my film study and whatnot, I was like, man, where do I know this guy from? He had to fight Nick Newell a couple fights back. And if you don't know who Nick Newell is, this is this dude who was supposed to get this UFC love a couple years back, around like 2018 or something, in the Dana White's Contender Series, trying to see if he can get a UFC shot. Nick Newell is the individual. He fights. He has a arm amputation or something like that, or maybe a birth defect, in one of his arms. So he's had to fight with one arm. And while some people have been like, wow, that must be some crazy disadvantage, it totally is. But this dude is an absolute killer. He's kind of like the Josh Peacocks of the world. And if you don't know who that guy is, that dude's an absolute savage too. Muay Thai fighter, one arm as well, but this dude just won the championship over that Lion fight. So it was like Lion fight 65 or 69. These dudes are savages, but Nick Newell is especially, he's a real killer right there. And he had to fight Nick Newell, which was very high risk, low reward, because think about it, from the layman perspective, from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about in terms of mixed martial arts, you say, oh, you lost to the dude with one arm? Like, what? Do you lose all your stock, right? Or yeah, you're supposed to beat the dude with one arm. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? But as we know, people don't know how much of a killer Nick Newell is or Josh Peacock. They don't know this because they don't pay attention to the sport. And that's fine, you know, neither here nor there. But at the end of the day, this matchup comes down to one and one thing only, man. It comes down to the wrestling. Luis Pena is going to look to do what he does on the feet. You know, he's 6'3", lanky, rangy, 75-inch reach. And Alexander Munoz, 5'9", 72-inch reach. And this dude, listen, man, he's looking for a takedown. He averages 2.5 takedowns per 15 minutes at about a 35% clip. Never been taken down in the UFC. And that's one of my notes about watching him fight, man. He establishes his offense based off of a jab and off of his wrestling. So if his jab can't go, the offense looks stagnant. If he can't secure a takedown on any of his shots, offense gets a little stagnant, because the whole point of him using his hands is to set up the takedown, to look for the ground and pound, because he's mean on the ground, man. And if he can get Luis Pena on the ground, Luis Pena only has a 45% takedown defense. If he can get him on the ground, it's going to be a long night, which is why there's another one right here. I mean, minus 160 for Pena, plus 125 for Munoz. You got to take into consideration that this is a very classic striker grappler matchup, or a striker wrestler matchup, because Luis Pena, he's a grappler himself, man. He's got, out of all of his finishes, he's got 2 knockouts, 2 decisions, but 4 submissions win. So you got to be careful. But sometimes these wrestlers, right, they can put themselves in these great positions, put themselves in half guard, put themselves in side control to where they're safe from the submission. They can just lay on top of you and smash a hole into your face. That's the name of the game. You know, so Alexander Munoz, 6-1 in MMA. He's 0-1 in the UFC, like we just talked about. And Luis Pena, 8-3, 4-3 in the UFC. This dude, he's coming off of bad loss to Kamaworthy in his last fight. Kamaworthy, who just got starched by Jamie Malarkey, right? You know, so listen, man, Luis Pena, he needs another big win. Luis Pena, you know, I think that he's itching to fight. He was really itching to fight when he was supposed to face off against Jakar Close, even saying that, hey, man, like, I think it was Close that had to pull out. So he was like, listen, man, if you can match me up against another dude tonight, like, I will fight. So I need to see where the jitters are for Luis Pena, how anxious he is to actually get out there and go and scrap, as opposed to Alexander Munoz, who, like I said, man, you know, this dude's a former regional champ, you know. He has actually a 3-second knockout, believe it or not, a 3-second knockout against Jesse Moreno over at XKL 28 back in the day. And, you know, at the end of the day, man, 52% striking defense, 3.27 significant strikes landed per minute at about a 52% clip. He needs to get the wrestling going, and I think he'll be able to do it against Luis Pena. The question will be, can he hold Pena down, or is Pena going to be able to get up and, you know, work some of the BJJ, or even, you know, try to get in the clinch, throw some big knees and whatnot? But I'm taking the wrestler on this one, man. Munoz is a high-level prospect. I think people, you know, might be trying to, like, brush him off a little bit after this last loss. But listen, man, dude won 6 in a row right before that. I know this is the big league. I know that, you know, he's 0-1 in his first shot in the UFC, but I think he'll be able to make it happen in this one. So I'm going to go plus 125 for Alexander Munoz. I really like that money line. I wasn't too interested in any of the props. None of those really had any true value. So that is that, folks. And now, lastly, move on to my best bets, man. So we're going to knock this out in these last 40 seconds. I'm going to talk about Justine Kish really quickly versus Tracy Cortez. Tracy Cortez is a high-level prospect. Very, very high level. I'll even go over the clock for this one because I got about 30 seconds left because I really want to hammer this one home. Tracy Cortez, man, she has big wins over Maria Agapova. You know, that was huge. Dana White Contender Series unanimous decision win. She's made some noise, right? She has a win against Erin Blanchfield, who is this highly touted prospect who was supposed to come and make her debut against Norma Dumont. You know, I don't think she would have won that fight, but, you know, high level, touted. You know, people were excited to see her fight, so she already has a win over her, and she has a huge win against Vanessa Mello, you know, unanimous decision win. That was 2 fights ago. You know, her last fight was against Egger. That was a win, unanimous decision. Listen, man, Cortez, 8-1, 2-0 in the UFC. She's on a roll. She got 1 knockout, 1 submission, 6 decisions. But Justine Kish, this is where we need to pump the brakes a little bit, because Justine Kish is absolutely no slouch, man. She's 7-3, 3-3 in the UFC, but her strength of schedule is so completely opposite to Tracy Cortez's, man. So Justine Kish, my best bet is a plus 210, plus 215 money line versus Tracy Cortez. I really like that, and the reason why is because, yeah, she got submitted in her last fight against Sabina Mazo, excuse me. But Sabina Mazo is super, super high level, and you know, she lost her last fight, which is it was weird. A lot of people watching that were like, what exactly happened? But Mazo, her length makes it really difficult. You know, her height and her reach made it really difficult for Justine Kish, who was only 5'5" with a 65-inch reach. You know, made it hard for her to close distance or even try to get a takedown or anything like that. But I have to note that in terms of the victories for Justine Kish, before she entered the UFC, she fought Randa Marcos over at Resurrection Fighting Allegiance or Fighting Alliance or something like that, 12, right? She won via unanimous decision. Now, that's Randa Marcos. I know Randa Marcos is like 10-10 in the UFC or something like that, but none, or 10-10 in MMA, something like that. But nonetheless, man, that's a huge win. Randa Marcos, she's a real contender, right? She has a win against Nina, or formerly known as Nina Ansaroff, now known as Nina Nunes. That was her UFC debut, and she won via unanimous decision. How impressive is that? You move on to the next one. She has a huge win against Ashley Yoder, the Spider Monkey, who just lost to Angela Hill, but nonetheless is a very, in terms of her division, man, high-level prospect, right? And then, she loses to Felice Herrig, who's ranked number 15 in the division right now. So this is what I'm saying, man. The strength of schedule is just so completely different. I think this is the biggest test of Tracy Cortez's career, not nearly the biggest test in Justine Kish's career. And I think that she's looking to really, she's looking for revenge, and she's looking to avenge her last loss against Sabina Mazo. So I think that Justine Kish, who is, listen, UFC vet since 2016, averages about a takedown per 15 minutes at about a 35% clip. But what's important is that she has about 55% takedown defense, and she's going to need it against Tracy Cortez, who is a former tough amateur champ. She averages about 3 takedowns per minute. She's really a wrestler, man. She has 9 takedowns in her last 3 fights, but Justine Kish has not been taken down at all in her last 3 fights, which is also interesting. So Tracy Cortez, I think that she's nice on her hands, but I think wrestling is a huge part of her game. And if Justine Kish could somehow, some way stay away and keep off the ground, and even if she does get put on the mat, get back up and try to keep it on her feet and be relentless in her approach, which she does, fight in and fight out, man. I'm a big fan of Justine Kish. I think that she can get the job done, man. And I think that Justine Kish to win via points at plus 325 is definitely a place where I find value, man. You don't have to go on that one. You don't have to do anything. This is all simply just information being put out there. So if you want to choose to go and place that wager, you totally can. But at the end of the day, man, I think Tracy Cortez, I think she's being hyped up right now because of the name value. I think she's a high-level prospect. Do not get me wrong. Very, very high-level prospect. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to see who's going to win, not who has the potential to, do better in the long term. I'm looking at this fight, Saturday night, UFC Vegas 24, and I think Justine Kish gets it done. Plus 325 to win via points because she has no knockouts, and I'm not expecting a submission here, especially not against a grappler like Tracy Cortez. So, yeah, plus 325. If you don't like the plus 215 for Justine Kish in terms of just money line, you can get even more value at plus 325. So it's something to hammer home there. And then lastly, I already talked about Chase Sherman at plus 105 versus Andre Arlovski. That's all day long, but this is the other thing. Like I said, Chase Sherman, in his last 5, let me go back really quickly before we get out of here, folks. In his last 5, Chase Sherman, he goes, let's see, there we go. He has knockout round 2, knockout round 1, knockout round 1, knockout round 1. He starts in everybody in the first and second rounds. Very rarely is he going to the third round. Very rarely is he going the distance. It only happened 3 times in his career. He's won 1 of them. He dropped 2 of them. So he does not want to go and let the judges settle the score. He wants to knock you out. So for this fight to be under 2.5 rounds against an old vet like Andre Arlovski, who's been knocked out 17 times in his career, in his 50 fights, been knocked out, he's been knocked out 11 times in his 50 fights, man. So nonetheless, you've been, knocked out a solid portion of those fights. I don't know, man. Last time that he got knocked out was against Jairzinho Rosenstruck. And, ever since then, it's been unanimous decision, then submission loss. But I still think he can get knocked out. I don't think that as you age, your chin gets any better. If anything, it only gets worse. So at the end of the day, I'm going fight under 2.5 rounds is one of my best bets for Chase Sherman. Plus 122. And at the end of the day, if Arlovski gets, somehow gets a knockout or gets a finish and under those 2.5 rounds, I mean, you still win at the end of the day because you don't even have to pick a certain individual. So that's what we got there, folks. And listen, thanks for tuning in, as always, to another episode of All Bets Aren't Created Equal, courtesy of allfactorsconsidered.com. And that's where you can go find the hub, the home for all the goodness, all the information that you need to make an educated bet, stumbling on my words over here, educated bet, right, to get the information you need to just, have a little friendly competition with your homies or whatever the case may be. But stay tuned. Keep it locked. Allfactorsconsidered.com. I am your host, Derick G. Once again, if you want to give me a follow on Instagram, I'll be at D496. But really, what's most important is give us a follow on allfactorsconsidered.com at Instagram. That's it, folks. Until next time, peace.